It was just a simple wooden ramp 4 feet wide, gently sloped, solid. I built it myself over the weekend for my cousin, Clara Brooks. She's a Marine, just like I was. Except Clara came home with half her spine shattered from a roadside bomb in Mosul. She doesn't talk much about it. She just wanted to get in and out of her house without needing help. That Monday morning, as I was sanding the edges, Madeline Carter showed up in her black HOA blazer and sunglasses that hid everything but her contempt. She just stood there, hands on hips, looking at Clara through her window like she was an eyesore. "People like her still live here?" she scoffed. I looked up, straight into those deadpan eyes. "I've faced mortars and sniper fire. I've crawled through mud soaked in blood and diesel. But I swear, that woman's stare was colder than any war zone I've known." 2 days later, I found the letter taped crookedly to Clara's front door HOA stationery, all bold fonts and veiled threats. "Ramp construction violates Article 7, Section C of Community Aesthetics," it read. "Structure must be removed within 48 hours or face escalating daily fines." No name signed at the bottom, just HOA management, like a faceless ghost with power, but I knew whose pen bled that ink. I stood there, holding the letter in my hand, heart pounding not from fear, but fury. Clara sat inside, unaware. She thought kindness still had a place in neighborhoods like this. I walked to the community board meeting that evening with the letter in my pocket. Not a soul looked me in the eye. Most shifted in their seats, pretending to read the agenda. Some mouthed quiet sympathy when Madeline wasn't watching, but none spoke up. I didn't blame them. HOA had a long memory and a mean streak. They'd revoke your garden rights, fine you for a fence post, or accidentally delay your mailbox repairs for months. Then Madeline stood, her heels clicking like a gavel. She didn't mention the ramp directly. She didn't have to. "If we allow one unapproved structure," she said, "we open the door for chaos. Buyers come here for a certain look, a certain standard. Letting someone like him change that." She paused, smiling without warmth. "Who will want to live here next?" Her gaze slid past me like I was invisible, or worse, like I was the reason this community needed protecting. And for the first time in decades, I felt the kind of rage that doesn't burn, it simmers. I didn't want to bring Clara to that meeting. Not because she wasn't strong, Lord knows she's stronger than most folks I've met, including many who still walk on 2 good legs. But I knew how this neighborhood operated. It wasn't just fences and flower beds. They guarded it was control, image, fear. But Clara insisted. "If they're gonna vote on my dignity," she said quietly, "I deserve a seat at that table." So I helped her into her chair, tightened the lap belt, and rolled her into the community clubhouse, the same one we both paid HOA fees to help maintain. The carpet was too thick for her wheels, the lights too bright, and the eyes far too sharp. The room fell quiet when we entered, not out of respect but discomfort. No one offered to move aside or make space. I wheeled her to the side aisle, while Madeline stood at the front, flanked by the other HOA board members in matching charcoal suits. "Mr. Brooks," she began, voice syrupy with condescension, "thank you for finally choosing to involve the proper channels." I stayed quiet. Clara raised her hand instead. "I'm just asking to keep the ramp," she said. "I served 2 tours overseas. I didn't come back in one piece. That ramp's not decoration, it's survival." The silence was stiff. Then Madeline gave that small, sharp chuckle, the kind that made your skin itch. "We appreciate your service, Ms. Brooks," she said, "but this community was designed for self-sufficient residents, people who maintain a certain lifestyle, not burdens." A few people shifted uncomfortably. One man coughed into his sleeve. No one spoke. Clara looked down, jaw clenched. "I used to be self-sufficient," she murmured. Madeline smiled wider. "Then perhaps this isn't the right place for you anymore." That was when he stepped forward, one of the board's enforcers, name tag reading Terry like it mattered. Big guy, bald, the kind who thought lifting weights made him important. "She's blocking the aisle," he said gruffly. "I'll move her," I replied. But before I could even grip the handles, he lunged behind Clara and jerked the wheelchair backward. She wasn't ready. One of the wheels snagged on the carpet. The chair tipped. I watched, frozen, as Clara slammed sideways onto the floor. Her elbow cracked against the tile, her good leg twisted beneath her. The room gasped, but no one moved. I dropped to my knees beside her. "Clara," I whispered. She looked up, face flushed with shock and shame. Her voice cracked. "I'm okay." But I wasn't. I stood slowly, fists clenched so hard my palms ached. My eyes scanned the room. Not a single neighbor had stood. No one had shouted. No one had even looked Madeline in the eye. They just stared at their HOA-approved shoes and their community guidelines, pretending not to witness what had just happened. Clara tried to pull herself upright. "I've got her," I said, lifting her gently. Terry shrugged. "She shouldn't have come." I stared at him, then at Madeline, then at all of them. "You built this place on silence," I said, voice steady, "and you protect it with cruelty." Madeline folded her arms. "We protect it with standards." I wheeled Clara to the door. She didn't say a word, but I heard her breathing tight, controlled, the way soldiers breathe when trying not to scream. Just before we left, I turned to the room one last time. "You want her ramp gone in 48 hours, I said. Madeline nodded, smug. "That's the rule." I smiled, a different kind of smile. "Then I've got 10 minutes to make a call." I didn't speak the whole drive home. Clara sat beside me in the truck, quiet as stone, her fingers curled in her lap, trembling just enough for me to notice. She had face-down mortar fire, pulled 3 men out of a flipped Humvee in Helmand Province, and yet it was a boardroom full of HOA board members and manicured cowardice that finally made her flinch. When I parked in front of her house, the ramp still stood there. I helped Clara back inside, settled her in the recliner, placed a blanket over her legs. She didn't look up, just whispered, "Maybe they're right. Maybe I don't belong here." That broke something in me. I stepped outside. Then I pulled out my phone. I didn't dial 911. I didn't want police reports. I didn't want statements. I wanted something stronger. Something real. I wanted honor. I scrolled down until I found the number. Still labeled the same after all these years. Staff Straunt Roscoe Big Man Jennings, 3rd Battalion, Bravo Company. It rang twice. "Brooks?" The voice was deeper now, rougher, but unmistakable. "Yeah," I said, "it's me." "Damn, man, it's been 15 years, you okay?" I swallowed hard. My throat tightened. "You remember Clara? Your cousin, Marine MP, saved my ass during that bridge collapse outside Kabul." "Yeah, I remember. Why?" I looked up at the sky. The clouds were hanging low, heavy with the weight of something that hadn't broken yet. "She just got humiliated," I said. Thrown out of her chair in front of a room full of people. By a man wearing a name tag and a homeowners association badge. Not a single neighbor helped. No one apologized. They called her a burden. There was silence on the other end. I continued. "She was the strongest person in that room, and they treated her like she didn't deserve to breathe their air, like her ramp was more offensive than their silence." "Where are you?" Jennings asked. I gave him the name of the town, the street, the HOA's name. I didn't raise my voice once. I didn't need to. Jennings let out a slow breath. "You want me to make some calls?" "No," I said quietly. "I want us to remind them." Another pause. Then, "I'll see what I can do. You still drink it black?" "Always." We hung up. I stood there for another minute, watching Clara's window from the driveway. The curtains didn't move, but I knew she was awake, knew she was listening. I didn't go back inside. Silent, waiting, listening for a sound I hadn't heard in a long time, the low, steady growl of unity, of boots marching as one. And 10 minutes later, I heard it. I heard it first, the low rumble in the distance, not loud, but heavy, intentional, the kind of engine you don't mistake for a delivery truck or a neighbor's lawnmower. It was the sound of something coming that didn't ask for permission. Clara was still inside. I hadn't told her I'd made the call. The rumble grew louder, until even the blinds in the living room trembled. And then it appeared. A desert tan Humvee rolled slowly down Maple Ridge Lane, past flower beds trimmed within regulation, mailboxes standing in neat HOA rows. Neighbors peered through their curtains like it was a tank rolling through their kingdom, and in a way, it was. The vehicle stopped directly in front of Clara's house. The engine idled, grumbling like it had unfinished business. Then the doors opened. First to step out was Master Sergeant Roscoe Jennings, tall and broad as ever, his gray hair trimmed high and tight, metals gleaming against his deep brown skin. His right knee was stiff from an old injury, but his presence carried a weight no injury could touch. Beside him, stepping lightly from the passenger side, was Captain Michelle Greeny, a black woman in full-dress blues, ribbons lined down her chest like stripes of earned fire. Her eyes were steady, calculating, compassionate but not soft. And behind them, from the rear seat, came Corporal Javier Ortiz, lean, sharp, and Latino, pushing an empty wheelchair with military precision, his uniform crisp, his hands steady. The three of them stood still for a moment, scanning the neighborhood. Then they marched. Their boots struck the pavement with synchronized certainty, 3 slow steps, then a turn toward the walkway, then a calm ascent up the ramp that had become a symbol of defiance and dignity. By now, curtains had opened fully, doors cracked, people gathered on porches with mugs and fake concern. HOA board members peeked from behind their manicured hedges. No one said a word. I stepped aside as they passed me on the front steps. Jennings gave me a nod. "Inside?" he asked. I just pointed. He knocked once on Clara's door. Not a loud knock, just 3 measured taps that sounded like punctuation marks to everything that had happened before. I opened the door from behind. Clara was still in her chair, blanket around her legs, back straight like a Marine waiting for orders. Her eyes widened slightly, then filled with something I hadn't seen in days: clarity. Jennings stepped in first. He drew himself to full attention, spine straight despite the old wound in his leg. His hand rose in a perfect salute. "Staff Sergeant Clara Brooks," he said, his voice strong, "on behalf of every soldier who ever stood beside you, forgive our delay." Clara didn't hesitate. Her body moved on instinct. She returned the salute with a hand that had once gripped the barrel of an M4 in a firefight. "Sir," she said, her voice quiet but unwavering. Captain Green stepped forward. "We heard what happened," she said. "We're not here for drama, we're here for presence." Clara looked at her. "Why now?" "Because silence was too loud," Corporal Ortiz replied from behind the chair. Captain Green nodded once. "Let's go outside." Clara hesitated, but something in her posture shifted, like a weight she'd been carrying for too long had finally started to lift. She nodded. I wheeled her out through the open door. And that's when the neighborhood truly went still. The sight of a decorated veteran woman, black, wounded, not being hidden away, but escorted by decorated service members in full uniform down a ramp the HOA had tried to erase. It hit them like thunder. We reached the foot of the ramp. Master Sergeant Jennings stepped to Clara's side again and faced the street. In one sharp motion, he turned, saluted her once more, then stood at attention. Captain Green followed, then Ortiz. 3 uniforms, 3 salutes. And one woman who never should have had to fight this war alone. Neighbors who'd once complained about unsightly structures now stood frozen in place, unsure if they were witnessing a protest, a ceremony, or a reckoning. HOA President Madeline Carter stood on her porch across the street. She wasn't smiling this time. Her arms were folded, but not from confidence this time. It was defense. She tried to turn away, but Jennings spoke loudly, without even looking at her. "Some battles aren't overseas." "And Clara?" She didn't say a word. She just nodded once. And for the first time in a long time, I saw peace on her face. We gathered in the HOA clubhouse 30 minutes after Clara's salute on the ramp. Not because we were invited, but because Jennings requested I tanned. When a master sergeant requests something in a tone like that, even the HOA listens. The room was the same as always: beige walls, glass water pitchers, rows of folding chairs, and a framed mission statement that said something about community excellence. Tonight, though, it all felt smaller, weaker. HOA President Madeline Carter stood at the front again, her black blazer stiff, her posture strained. The usual smirk that sat on her lips, like a brand of superiority, was gone or replaced by something twitchy, uncertain. She didn't know what this meeting was about, not really. But the murmurs around the neighborhood had spread too quickly for her to ignore. The veterans showed up first. Quiet, steady. Some wore ball caps faded from decades of Sun Vietnam, Gulf, Desert Storm. Others had polished boots, crisp shirts, ribbons worn over their hearts. They weren't there to speak. They were there to stand. I wheeled Clara in. Captain Green and Corporal Ortiz walked behind us. Jennings stood tall and still at the entrance, scanning the room like he was back on watch. People whispered. I caught words like dramatic, unnecessary. She could have handled it better. But none of them said it out loud, not with Jennings in the back, arms folded like a statue carved from old stone. Then he stepped forward. No podium, no microphone, just the presence of a man who had nothing left to prove. I was 32 when a roadside IED flipped our convoy outside Kandahar, he began, his voice low and steady. Metal tore through 3 vehicles. We lost 2 men on impact. I was bleeding out behind a burning Humvee, ribs crushed, leg pinned. He looked at Clara. And Staff Sergeant Clara Brooks pulled me out with one arm, fire licking her sleeves, blood in her eyes. She carried me across 200 meters of open field, alone, while taking enemy fire. The room was dead silent. You could hear the hum of the old AC unit trying to pretend nothing had changed. She didn't ask if I was worth saving, Jennings said. She didn't check if my uniform matched hers. She saw someone in need and moved. He stepped aside, turned to Madeline. And then I come here, he said, his voice tightening, and find out that the woman who saved my life is being humiliated by people who call themselves neighbors. Madeline blinked. Her lips parted as if she had words ready, but nothing came out. She looked down at her clipboard, then back up, trying to reassert control. I didn't realize that she was. A soldier? Jennings cut in. A hero? A woman with more backbone than this whole board combined? He didn't shout. He didn't have to. All across the room, veterans began to stand. First was Mr. Harlan, who fought in Vietnam and hadn't spoken at a meeting in years. Then Ms. Torres from the end of the street Air Force, retired, always quiet, always respectful. Then 2 men in their 40s wearing National Guard shirts and steel-toed boots. They didn't say anything, just stood and placed their hands over their hearts. One by one, the room transformed. Not into chaos, into order, the kind of order forged from unity. Even those who weren't veterans began to rise. Parents, teachers, neighbors who had looked the other way for too long. Only the HOA board remained seated, frozen, like they'd walked into a funeral and realized too late it was their own reputation being buried. Madeline's voice finally returned, a nervous whisper that carried more guilt than authority. I didn't know, she said. I didn't know what she'd done. Clara spoke for the first time. You shouldn't have needed to. Her voice wasn't bitter, it was just tired, the kind of tired you carry when you've fought for respect longer than you fought any war. Madeline stepped back, swallowing hard. Her fingers clenched the edge of the folding table like it might keep her upright. Jennings faced the crowd again. Let me be clear, he said. You don't need a uniform to deserve dignity. You don't need combat ribbons to be treated like a human being. But it should mean something when someone like Clara lives among you. He looked to the veterans. We protect each other, whether in battlefields or backyard meetings. Then, quietly, he turned to Clara. And in front of everyone, nearly 50 neighbors, board members, and HOA loyalists, she dropped into a full salute. Captain Green and Corporal Ortiz joined him, eyes sharp, back straight. I stood beside Clara, heart thundering, hand clenched against the wheelchair's handle. And in that moment, no one cared about community codes, lawn colors, or ramp aesthetics. They saw one thing: honor. And none of them, not even Madeline, could speak over it. Word spread like wildfire. Within hours of the meeting, someone had uploaded a photo Clara on her wheelchair at the base of the ramp, with 3 decorated Marines standing in salute beside her, no caption needed. It was the kind of image that spoke louder than outrage, louder than speeches, just truth, frozen in a moment. By sunrise, it had been shared over 80 times. By noon, the local news stations were circling our quiet neighborhood like buzzards. They weren't here for Yard of the Month or HOA updates, they were here for a reckoning. Reporters knocked on doors. Microphones hovered. News vans rolled slowly down our HOA manicured lanes. Headlines popped up on every screen. Veteran shamed by HOA gets military support in neighborhood stands behind her. Madeline Carter didn't come out that day, or the day after. But people talked. They talked about the HOA's years of nitpicking and silence, about who got fined for a flower pot and who didn't, about Clara's ramp and how it became a line in the sand. And for once, they talked loud enough to matter. A petition started circulating digitally and on paper. Residents who once stayed silent out of fear began signing with surprising speed. Within 48 hours, over 70% of homeowners requested Madeline's resignation. A local city council member called for a formal investigation into the HOA's conduct. The words discrimination, retaliation, and targeting of disabled veterans made their way into official documents. Clara, meanwhile, never stepped in front of a camera. She turned down interviews, politely but firmly. She didn't need to speak on her own behalf. The ramp spoke for her. But one morning, while I was sweeping leaves off her porch, she received a letter sealed, with the HOA's gold emblem on it. Inside, there was no fine, no threat, no warning. Just a single sentence. "We apologize for our treatment of you. You deserved better." It wasn't signed by Madeline. She'd already stepped down, but it came from the newly formed transitional board neighbors who realized too late what silence had cost them. That same week, I got a knock on my door. It was Harold Green, an older man who once sat on the board, now looking 10 years heavier. "Elijah," he said, "we're forming a new council, a fair one. The neighbors want you to be part of it. We need your voice." I looked at him for a long while. Not angry, just tired of pretending respect could be handed out like invitations. "Thanks," I said, "but I don't need a title." Harold looked confused. "You don't want to serve?" I shook my head. "I don't need a seat, I don't need a vote, I just need one thing." I handed him a printed photo, the same one everyone had seen. Clara at the ramp, 3 salutes rising around her like pillars. I need that ramp to stay, and I need this neighborhood to remember what it cost her to keep it. Harold nodded, voice tight. "That's more than fair." Later that evening, I sat with Clara on her porch. The sun was setting behind the maples, bathing the ramp in a soft amber light. It looked almost golden. She didn't say much, just stirred her tea slowly, the same way she had during deployment briefings all those years ago. "You know," I said, "for a ramp that caused so much trouble, it sure brought a lot of truth to the surface." She gave a quiet chuckle. "Funny how that works." And for the first time in months, she leaned back in her chair and simply exhaled like she was finally breathing air that didn't ask her to explain who she was. That ramp was no longer just wood and screws. It was a monument. Not to defiance, but to dignity restored. 1 year later, the ramp was still there, weathered by rain, kissed by snow, warmed again by spring sun. But now it bore something new, a wooden plaque, carved by hand and screwed into the side rail. The words were simple, but they held the weight of everything we had lived through. Kindness isn't a rule, it's a responsibility. Clara didn't ask for the sign. A young couple down the street, both veterans, had made it after hearing her story from their own children. They didn't announce it, didn't hold a ceremony. Just walked up one Saturday, nodded silently, and screwed it in while Clara watched from her chair, eyes glassy. Now, that ramp wasn't just hers. It belonged to every person who ever felt overlooked, erased, or told to stay quiet and stay small. It belonged to everyone who knew that standing your ground doesn't always look like shouting, it can look like surviving with grace. That afternoon, Clara and I sat together on the porch like we always did, 2 chairs, 1 blanket shared between us. Her legs were wrapped tight for the colder breeze, but the fire in her eyes was calm and bright. Across the street, kids raced on scooters, their laughter echoing like little drumbeats of joy. One of them, a boy named Malik, stopped at the end of the driveway and waved. "Hi, Miss Clara. Hi, Mr. Elijah." Clara raised her hand and smiled. I tipped my hat. Down the block, a neighbor I once thought would never even make eye contact with me, Mr. Thomas, former board member, walked by with his wife. He slowed, met my eyes, and nodded with genuine warmth. "Evening, Mr. Brooks, Ms. Brooks." Progress doesn't always arrive with applause. Sometimes, it arrives in quiet gestures: a neighbor who finally sees you, a child who doesn't flinch at a wheelchair, a ramp that's no longer questioned, only respected. Clara took a sip from her mug. "Feels different now." "It is," I said, "not perfect, but better." She looked over at the plaque again, then at me. "You ever regret not joining the board?" I chuckled, slow and low. I never wanted to sit at their table. I just wanted to make sure they saw ours. And then I leaned back, letting the porch creak beneath my weight, letting the day settle over us like a prayer. "They thought we were weak," I said softly, eyes scanning the horizon. "But dignity doesn't scream, it just endures until justice arrives." And right then, with the light hitting Clara's ramp just right, I knew it had.